Okay, folks, we're going to finish Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We're on to part four. If you recall, last time was the part three, the final part of that, the last day, where Gawain took a magic belt from the lady, which is going to protect him from any damage that the Green Knight might cause to him. He knows he's going to his death, but with this belt, he expects or hopes that he can survive the encounter. He had to break his honor and his code of chivalry to do this, and so the question is, what are the repercussions of that, and how is the story going to progress? So the Lord promised to give him a guide to take him to the Green Chapel. It is New Year's Day, the final day of Gawain's life. So let's start reading here in part four. I apologize that the PDF is in two parts, so you can't just keep reading. You're going to have to read part of part four on this PDF, and then you're going to have to open up the second PDF to read the second part. I'll put them both in the module for you so that you can get that. But here we go, part four. Now New Year's comes and the night passes. Daylight replaces darkness as God decrees, but storms crackled through the world. Clouds tumbled their bitter cold on earth. North winds freezing the poor. Snow shivered in the air and animals shook. The wind whistled from the hills and drove snowdrifts down in the valleys. So we have a thunder snow. Anybody who's ever experienced that? I experienced that actually here in Virginia a few years ago. It was snowing and thundering at the same time. But let's stop and let's talk about something that you see in literature that it's important that you understand, that not only do seasons have symbolic representations, but weather has symbolic representations. And that weather and its representation is pretty clear. Sunshine represents clarity. Rain often represents either a baptism / rebirth or cleansing or sorrow. Very different things, but it can represent one or the other. A storm represents conflict, some either an internal or external conflict or danger. Clouds and mist represent mystery or confusion. Snow either represents purity because of the color white or death because of the seasonal associations, right? And so you've got all of these various symbols that are attached to weather. And here, the dawn of the last day of Gawain's life, brings an end to the cycle. We've seen day one in part three, it was fall. The leaves are on the trees. Day two, the leaves are on the ground. Day three, there was a frost. The last day of Gawain's life, there's a snow. We're getting to that, death imagery in the life cycle, but also it's a storm indicating conflict, right? So we got conflict coming up. Anyway, where was I? And Gawain listened, lying in his bed. His eyelids were closed, but he slept little. Each cockcrow told him what hour had come. So here's the rooster, like off in the distance, and he knows it's morning. And just before dawn he rose, dressing quickly by the light of a lamp. Then he called his groom, who came running, and ordered him to bring his mail shirt and Gringolet's saddle. His weapons and all his armor were brought, and Gawain was made magnificently ready. First wool against the winter cold. Hold up. Last time Gawain left Camelot, he had furs underneath his armor. This time he's got wool. Well, remember, Christian story, Christian imagery. Is Gawain like a Jesus figure here? Is he going off to the sacrifice? Why wool? What's the association there? Something to consider. Where was I? First wool against the winter cold, and then his bright polished war gear. The belly shield and the steel plates and the gleaming rings of his mail shirt, already shining as when he'd worn them to that castle. His groom had wiped and rubbed them inch by inch. So this is that scene that you get in all sports movies where they're getting for the final event. Everybody's getting their equipment on and that kind of thing. That's Gawain. He's putting on his armor. He's getting ready. What did that just end with? No man was handsomer from Rome to Dublin. So he's the most attractive man. I think this is a good counterpoint to the lady being the most attractive woman in the world. He's the most attractive man sort of in Europe, for what it's worth. And though he wore the most glorious clothes, a heraldic vest embroidered over in velvet with magical jewels mounted in front and seams sewn in color, all lined inside with the softest fur, he also wore the lady's gift, well aware of his own best interest. When his sword hung at his side, he wound that belt twice around him, wrapped it quickly, happily across his waist. the bright green silk shining beautifully against the royal red of his tunic. Nice color imagery here. We got Christmas colors, right? This is a Christmas story, and he's wearing that red tunic representing sacrifice, but he sort of marred the perfect red with this green. Remember, green was representing nature and paganism and some of those things that we had with the Green Knight earlier, as he's wearing this sash against the royal red of his tunic. But Gawain was indifferent to that rich glow, to the polished stones gleaming at its fringe, to the gold glittering at either end, determined to save his neck when he bent it toward death, tamely taking an axe blow, a knife stroke. So he's going to go take this, swing from the Green Knight. But what's coming across here, I think the author is clearly sort of in direct characterization trying to tell you that Gawain did not take the belt because it's expensive. He doesn't care about the jewels. He doesn't care about the gold. He cares about his life. The only reason he took that belt was to save his life. So he's not greedy. Dressed, armed, he left the castle, quickly walked to his horse, thanking the noble folk around him. And Gringolet was ready, stood huge, waiting, well fed, well lodged when his master rested, now strong and ready to gallop. This is another indication of what a good host the Lord is. Gawain comes out and his horse looks better, is better taken care of, is healthier than when he arrived. So his horse has been well tended. It'd be like if you went to somebody's house for Christmas and you came out to leave and your car had been detailed. I mean, like that's essentially what's going on here. And seeing his sleek flanks, Gawain quietly exclaimed, his words sober, "There are men in this castle who care about courtesy, and their lord maintains them. May he live in joy. May love be his lovely lady's reward. When they open these gates, when they welcome a guest, honor flows from their hands. May the Lord of all of us reward them who rules in heaven. And if I survive here on earth, may I live to reward you myself." Then he set his foot in the stirrups and swept to the saddle. I mean, this is that scene where I should probably play theme music again, because the reality is, like he's leaving on his quest and it's that epic moment. I mean, look at the description here. He swept into his saddle. His shield was brought and he took it on his shoulder. And with golden heels, he spurred Gringolet and he stopped prancing, leaped forward on the pavement. So the horse rears and they leap across. His rider was mounted, spear and sword waved in the air. "May Christ save this castle," Gawain pronounced. Then the drawbridge came down. Clink, 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 clink. Boom. And the thick gates drew back. Right? Swung open, unbarred, and the knight crossed himself and rode across. He blessed the porter who kneeled before him, wishing him Godspeed and God's goodwill. For Gawain, then almost alone, rode off, following in his guide's footsteps, leading him along the dangerous road to that axe stroke. Trees stood bare. All the leaves are gone, right, on the slopes where they rode. And the rock cliffs lay frozen. Clouds blew high, but the sky was ugly. Mist drizzled, melted on the mountains. Every hill wore a hat, a cloak of fog. There's mystery, right? Brooks foamed at their banks, splashing on the shore. Bright where they flowed, their path wound wild around a wood, till the time when the winter sun rises in the sky. Snow covered the high hill they rode on, white and cold, and the guide drew up, asked Gawain to halt. "I brought you this far. Now you've come close, knight, to that place you've been hunting, scurrying and prying so hard to find. Let me speak to you privately, for I know who you are." Gotta change the page here. And why is it not? I gotta change hold on one second. This is the end of part 1 PDF. You've got to go to part 2 PDF, and I'll do that. So I've opened the second PDF here. "And I speak as someone who loves you. If you'll listen to me, you'll manage this business better. That place where you're hurrying is dangerous, knight. The most horrible creature in the world lives in that wilderness, a grim wild man who loves to kill. The hugest creature on the earth, bigger and stronger than 4 of Arthur's best knights, or Hector, or anyone else. He waits in the green chapel, grim, determined, and no one who rides by, no knight proud of his sword, but he beats him to death with one blow. A ruthless man, born pitiless, who kills priests, or peasants, monks, or abbots, anyone who passes. Killing is as natural as air to him. And so I say to you, sitting in your saddle, if you go there, you're dead. It's a simple truth, knight. Dead if you'd 20 lives to lose. He's lived there for years. He kills as he chooses. Fight without fear, Gawain, but you're bound to lose. And so, good sir, leave him in peace. In the name of God, pick some different path. Ride wherever Christ takes you, and I'll hurry home. And I promise you, knight, I swear by God and all his saints, I'll swear by any oath you ask, that I'll keep your secret, conceal this story forever, keep it from everyone on earth. All right, that was very nice of the guide, right? Offering to lie for Gawain and let him escape and not face this final challenge. But let's stop and analyze what he says. The guide says, I speak as someone who loves you. If you'll listen to me, you'll manage this business better. So he's offering him an alternative. He says that clearly. The place you're hurrying, the Green Chapel, is dangerous knight, the most horrible creature. We don't say the Green Knight is a man here or a knight. He's a creature. So we're giving him negative attributes. Lives there in that wilderness, a grim wild man. So we're associating him with wilderness and wild, who loves to kill. The hugest creature on the earth, bigger and stronger than 4 of Arthur's best knights. Gawain has no hope. He's only one of Arthur's knights, and according to Gawain and his humility, not even one of the best ones. Or Hector or anyone else. This is an illusion. Anybody who is familiar with the Iliad by Homer, it's ancient Greek. Hector was the greatest warrior of Troy. The only greater warrior in the entire story was Achilles. So, Hector was mortal. Achilles was a demigod. Hector was the best human fighter on that battlefield. By that, illusion, we're saying that this Green Knight is better than any human can possibly be at fighting. The author gets that across pretty clearly. He waits in that green chapel, grim, determined, and no one rides by, no knight proud of his sword, but he beats him to death with one blow. The Green Knight kills everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a great knight or whatever. You get killed with one blow. He's a ruthless man. He's born pitiless. He has no pity. This is some more connection to the negative aspects of nature here. Nature doesn't have pity. It doesn't know to feel one way or the other. The Green Knight apparently kills priests or peasants, monks or abbots. He'll kill anybody who passes. It's indifferent. It doesn't matter if you're a kid or a woman or a priest or whatever. He just kills you, and that's nature again. Nature is indifferent to who dies and who lives. And so I say, sitting in your saddle, if you go there, you're dead. It's a simple truth. Knight dead if you'd 20 lives to lose. So the guide says to Gawain, you can go and you could fight this guy 20 times. If you were in a video game with 20 lives, you'd die every single time. All 20 of those lives would be gone. And so at the end of this, he says, leave him in peace. In the name of God, pick some different path. Ride wherever Christ takes you, and I'll lie about it. So he offers to lie. Look at Gawain's response. Gawain is pissed, but he's going to be politely pissed. He's angry, and he's going to be polite about it. You can see, if you've ever been grimly polite to somebody, you want to tell them what you think, but you have to follow social custom. Maybe this is a moment when Gawain loses a little bit of that humility that he's been holding on to throughout this entire story. Another element of his code of chivalry sort of coming into question. Let's see. By God, said Gawain, grimly polite, I'm grateful, fellow, for all your good wishes. I believe you'd keep it secret. I believe you. But however loyally you lied, if I rode away, fled for fear, as you tell me, I'd be a coward no knight could excuse. Whatever comes, I'm going to that chapel, and I'll meet that wild man. However it happens, it will happen for evil or good, as fate decides. However wild he may be, God can see, God can save. By Mary, said the man, you've said so much of your bravery that the blame will be yours when you lose your life. If you want to lose it, proceed. Your helmet's on your head, your spear's in your hand. Ride along the rocky side of this path. You'll come to a wild valley. On your left, a little further down, you'll see exactly what you want, that green chapel and the green oaf who owns it. Gawain the noble, go, in God's name. I wouldn't join you for all the gold in the world, not a foot further through this wood. And he swung his horse round, dug his heels in its side, and raced away, leaving Gawain with no guide, alone in the woods. So, Gawain has this last, I guess if you want to call it, test of courage, and sort of passes. He's going to face the Green Knight, regardless of what's coming. And the guide runs away. The guide is cowardly. God is good, said the knight. I'll not weep or complain. I'll keep my trust in him. I'll do as he would. Then he spurred Gringolet down the path, across a slope beside a grove, riding a rough road to the valley below. Then he looked about. It seemed wild. No sign of shelter anywhere. Nothing but steep hills on every side. Gnarled crags with huge rocks. Crags scratching at the sky. Great personification there. So this is a valley between two really tall mountaintops that have these rocks on top that almost look like scary hands that are scratching. So it's a sort of a spooky setting. He stopped, pulled back on the reins, held Gringolet ready, while he stared this way and that, seeking the chapel. He saw nothing except a queer kind of mound in a glade close by, a rounded knoll near a stream, set on the bank beside the brook, and water bubbling as though it were boiling. He sent Gringolet forward, stopped near the mound, dismounted, and tied his horse to a lime tree, looping the reins on a branch. Then he walked closer, walked around the knoll, trying to think what it was. He saw holes at the end and on the sides, saw patches of grass growing everywhere, and only an old cave inside, a hole, a crevice in the crag. He couldn't tell. Pause. So we were all picturing the Green Chapel as being some kind of a church, but it turns out the Green Chapel is a mound, an earth mound, covered in grass with 4 doors into it, one for each direction, and it's a cave inside. This earth mound looks like a burial chamber, looks like a barrow, just like the dragons in Beowulf. I think there's a connection there. It's surrounded by water, and the water is boiling, just like Grendel's lair in Beowulf. This place is a natural place. It's not a man-made place. It's got 4 doors. We talked about the life cycle and what 4 represents and sort of the numerology of the place. We're in part 4 now. Instead of getting 3s, we're getting 4s. I think it's also interesting that this hill or this valley is full of snow, but the one place that's not is this green hill. It's still green. The grass is growing on it. He ties his horse to a lime tree. A lime is a fruit that's green. We have lots of green imagery associated here with this mound, which seems to be the home of the Green Knight. Anyway, let's see how Gawain reacts. My lord, said that courteous knight, can this be the chapel? At midnight here, the devils of hell could pray their prayers quite well. So Gawain realizes for the first time that maybe this isn't a chapel to God. Maybe it's a chapel to some pagan deity or to Satan or devils or whatever. And he pictures the kind of rites that might be done here. By Jesus, it's lonely here. This chapel is ugly, gruesome, all overgrown, but a good place for the Green Knight. He could serve the devil properly here. By Christ, it's Satan who struck me with this meeting. I feel it. He sent me here to destroy me. What an evil church. May destruction end it. The most cursed chapel I've ever come to. So Gawain has a sudden realization that maybe the Green Knight actually is Satan. Maybe he's made a deal with the devil, and now he's honor-bound by his code of chivalry to carry it out. And this sort of shakes him. You get the sense that he's sort of shaken to his core a little bit when he realizes that. But he's made a promise, and a promise is a promise, and he's an honorable guy, right? So here we are. Let's see. He climbed, his helmet on his head, his spear in his hand. He climbed across to its rough roof, then heard from a high hill on a boulder beyond the brook a violent noise. What? It clattered on the cliff as if to split it, like a grindstone grinding a scythe. What? It whirred like water at a mill. What? It rushed and it rang and it sang miserably. What? What is this? Well, we have to analyze this. This sound is characterized as what, but that's a weird sound to hear. It's not onomatopoetic. It's certainly not the sound it makes. So he's standing on top of the Green Chapel. He's looking for the Green Knight. He doesn't see him anywhere. And while he's standing on it, having this realization that maybe he made a deal with the devil, he starts hearing a sound. It's a violent noise. That's a personification. What kind of a sound is it? Well, it's a sound that clatters on the cliff as if to split it. Like, and this is a simile, a grindstone grinding a scythe. In other words, it's the sound shink, shink of somebody sharpening an axe, right? And sharpening it loudly enough that it echoes through the valley. Shink, 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 shink. Can you imagine being Gawain and standing there, knowing your head's about to be chopped off by an axe, and suddenly you hear somebody sharpening the thing? That's what's going on here. Also, interesting choice. The simile is not calling it an axe. It's calling it a scythe. That's the weapon of death, right? So Death, the skull guy who comes and harvests souls or whatever. So cool. This is the sound that he hears. And it sings miserably. Again, personification. That's meant for me, said Gawain. A kind of greeting, by Christ. I'll greet him better. God's will be done. Alas, alas, what good is wailing? It never helps. I'll never gasp, though my life is severed. Then he raised his voice, calling out loud, Who lives in this place? Who's here as he promised to be? Gawain is walking right on your roof. If you want him, come to him quickly, now or never. Let's have it done with. So Gawain's like, here, I came. I'm standing where I'm supposed to be. Come down here and chop my head off, or I'm leaving. Um, just wait, said someone high up over his head. What you're waiting to have, you'll have in a hurry. But he stayed where he was, working that wheel with a whirring roar. So you hear the Green Knight's response. It's from up in the cliff somewhere, maybe a little cave or a crag or something, inside which he's sharpening a weapon. And he's like, hold on, it's not sharp enough. Shink, shink. So Gawain has to stand there and listen to the axe with which his head is going to be severed get sharpened some more. You can feel the intimidation tactic here. Where was I? But he stayed where he was, working that wheel with a whirring roar. Then he stopped and stepped down across a crag, came through a hole, whirling a fierce weapon, a long-bladed battle axe, sharpened for the stroke. Its massive blade bent to the shaft, filed like a knife on a grindstone 4 feet wide. Interesting, 4 feet, again, an image of mortality. And the way this axe is described is actually much more like a scythe than an axe. It's got a curved blade that bends almost down to the shaft. You can almost picture it there. Let's see. A leather strap hung its length, and the Green Man looked as he looked at the start, his skin and his beard and his face, except that he skipped like a dancer. There's that ambiguity again. He's like, I'm having a good time. Setting his axe handle on the stones and leaping along. At the brook, to keep dry, he leaned on the handle and hopped across. He vaults across the brook. And hurried to Gawain, grim on a broad battlefield covered with snow. And Gawain waited, not bowing low. And the Green Man said, you came. I can trust you now. Be careful, Gawain. You're welcome, the Green Man went on, here in my home. You've made a difficult journey, and you came on time. You've kept your faith. Now keep the rest. A year ago, I gave you your chance. Today, the turn is mine. We're completely alone in this valley. No one can come between us, however fiercely we fight. Take off your helmet and take my axe stroke. Hold yourself still as I did when you slashed my head from my shoulders with a single blow. By God, said Gawain, may the Holy Ghost grant me the power to begrudge you nothing. Keep to the bargain, swing just once, and I'll stand still, and you'll do exactly as you please. And he bent his neck, leaned forward, the white flesh gleamed. He tried to seem fearless, but his knees were weak. And the Green Man got ready, lifted that huge axe in both his hands, swung it up with all his strength, and pretended to swing straight at his neck. If he'd hurled it down as he swung it high, Gawain would have been dead forever. But the knight looked to the side and saw it coming, glittering as it fell to his throat, and he pulled his shoulders back just a bit. And the Green Man jerked the blade away and poured a host of proud words on that prince. So the Green Knight gets ready. He's like, right, and he takes the axe. He's like, and he brings it down, and Gawain sees it coming, and he's like, and he flinches a bit, and the Green Knight holds the axe, and it's like, and he doesn't finish the swing, and so now he's like, you flinched, right? Like, that would piss me off, but whatever. Let's see what's going on here. He poured a host of proud words on that prince. Gawain? You can't be Gawain. His name is too noble. He's never afraid. Nowhere on earth, and you flinch in advance. I've heard nothing about Gawain the coward, and did I flinch, fellow, when you swung at my neck? Now, I never spoke a word. My head fell, and I never flinched. And you, before it can happen, your heart is quaking. Who doubts that I am the better man? Right, so the Green Knight is like pouring a host of, I guess, mocking words down on Gawain for flinching. He's like, you flinched, you sucker. You're not a very good knight. Look at Gawain's response. I flinched, said Gawain. I won't again. And this much is plain. My head, when it falls, won't talk in my hands. So Gawain is here, his retort is like, look, you knew you weren't going to die. Shut up. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous about having my head chopped off. I think that's fair. I think he's got a fair response here. But get it done. Let it be over. Bring my fate and bring it quickly. I'll stand like a stone on my word of honor. My neck will be still till your stroke comes to it. Have at you then, he cried, and heaved it up and glared as fierce as a madman. He swung it sharply, but not at his neck, held it back before it could hurt him, and Gawain waited, stood like a stone, or a stump of a tree tied to the ground by 100 tangled roots, and the green man laughed and told him gaily, I take it you're ready now, and it's time to strike. Let Arthur's knighthood save your neck, that noble rank protect you, if it can. So look at this. Now the Green Knight's like, okay. He bugs his eyes out like a madman, like, and he's like, he brings it down, he stops it like a centimeter from Gawain's neck. And Gawain doesn't flinch this time. And he's like, oh, you didn't flinch. I guess you are ready to die. I mean, like, if I was Gawain, I'd have an aneurysm right there. The guy's toying with him, right? Like, he hasn't taken his swing yet. He's like taking like fake swings. May the better man, and Gawain replied, angry and ashamed. May the better man strike. You take too long. Perhaps you frightened yourself with these threats. Ah, well, said the Green Man, you've turned so brave that I need to delay no longer. Your time is now. He took up a stance, and his face scowled, and to Gawain his chances of living seemed scant. He swung his weapon swiftly up and down, the blade toward the bare flesh, and he struck hard, but he hurt him only with a nick that snipped the skin. The edge grazed Gawain's white neck, and bright blood shot from his shoulder to the ground. As soon as he saw that gleam on the snow, he leaped forward, a spear length or more, throwing his helmet furiously into place, jerking his shield around in front of him, drawing his sword and speaking fiercely. Never since his mother bore him had he known half the happiness he suddenly felt. Pause. We get a good snapshot of Gawain the warrior here. We haven't seen him fight anybody to this point, but in a quick motion, he's got his helmet on his head, he's got his sword and his shield out. It took him like a second to do that. And he's ready to face the Green Knight now in combat if he has to. He also feels awesome because he's not dead. He took the axe stroke and it just nicked his neck a little bit. He's somehow survived this impossible task, this impossible challenge. Stop, Green Man. Don't swing again. I've taken a single stroke and stood still for it. No more, or else I'll repay you in kind. Believe me, fellow, I'll pay you fully and well. You've had your stroke, and one was all we agreed to in Arthur's Hall. And so, sir, stop, halt. The Green Man stood listening, leaning on his axe. It was upside down. He rested on the blade. And watching the knight, how bravely he waited, how unafraid, how armed and ready, standing alert. And he liked what he saw. And then he spoke with a cheerful, booming voice, addressing Gawain. Warrior, soldier, no need to be fierce now. No one's used you badly, showed you discourtesy. What was done was what we agreed. I owed you a stroke. I paid you a stroke. I release you from any and all obligations. Perhaps if my hands were quicker, I could have dealt you a better blow and done harm. I pretended one stroke, a threat, a joke, but I left you whole. I had the right because of our other agreement in my castle. You kept it faithfully, performed like an honest man, giving me everything you got except that you kissed my wife. I swung for that reason. But you gave me back her kisses, so all you got for that was a puff of air. An honest man need never fear, but still, the third day in my castle you failed, and you felt that here. Pause. Wait. What? Yeah, let's rewind that a minute and see what he just said again. He says, I owed you a stroke and I paid you a stroke. I release you from any and all obligations. Cool, that sounds good. He cut him just a little and he calls it good enough. Apparently all he really wanted to see was if Gawain would come or not. And Gawain came, and so he didn't get killed. He just got a little bit nicked. But why? Now he gets down to the reasoning. He says, I pretended one stroke, a threat, a joke, but left you whole. I had the right because of our other agreement in my castle. You kept it faithfully, performed like an honest man, gave me everything you got. Wait a second. It turns out that the Green Knight and the Lord are in fact the same dude. Same guy, 100%. I don't know how he got giant and green. That's not explained here. But it turns out that it's all part of the same test. And we're going to have to look at that and think about that. You kept it faithfully, performed like an honest man, gave me everything you got, except that you kissed my wife. I swung for that reason. So if Gawain had never kissed the lady, he wouldn't have even been swung at. But you gave me back her kisses, so all you got for that was a puff of air. Okay, wait, how many swings did the Green Knight take at this guy? He took 3. 1 for each day of that second game. The first time he didn't cut Gawain at all because Gawain gave back the kisses. The second time, same thing. Third time he cut Gawain a little bit. He says, still the third day there in my castle, you failed and you felt that here. And he's going to explain that right here. So this is a huge twist. The Lord and the Green Knight, the same guy. That belt you're wearing, it's mine. My wife gave it to you. I know it all, Knight, the kisses you took and gave, and all you did and how she tempted you. Everything, for I planned it all to test you. Hold up. It turns out that the lady is not a strumpet. She was doing what her husband wanted. This was all part of the plan. If you're going to test chivalry, you need to test more than just courage and honor. You've got to test courtesy and purity and faith. And how do you do that? Well, you need a lady. And the whole thing was part of a test. So if Gawain had tried to get with her, maybe there were people waiting outside the door to take him. You know, like maybe there was more to this than otherwise expressed. This lady was just doing what her husband wanted as part of the test of Sir Gawain. And I think that's interesting. And let's see how he did. I know he failed, you know, like he broke his courtesy, he broke his honor, you know, and that's why he's got a cut on his neck. But the Green Knight's going to express this. We have an analogy coming up. Remember analogies from some of those middle school tests? This is to this, as that is to that. I think they're on the SAT still and stuff like that. Look at this analogy. Let's see. For I planned it all to test you, and truly not many better men have walked this earth, been worth as much, like a pearl to a pea compared to other knights. It's a bad translation. It's a pearl to a white pea. If you took a plate of white peas and you put one pearl in there, from a distance, how would you tell which one's valuable and which ones are not valuable? He says that's how knights are. You put them all in their armor and line them up. They all look like pearls, but only one of them is valuable, and that one is Gawain, compared to all the other knights. Like a pearl to a pea compared to other knights. But you failed a little, lost good faith, not for a beautiful belt or in lust, but for love of your life. I can hardly blame you. And so here it comes. The Green Knight says, you failed. You lost good faith. Good faith, I think, is interesting because it implies two things. One, good faith, like a good faith estimate, is something like when you keep true to your bargains, you keep true to your word. He lied. He broke his faith in the bargain that he made with the Lord. But it also implies a loss of faith, which is one of the elements of chivalry. And when you stop and you think about it, he really did. Remember that Gawain, one of Gawain's elements is faith in God. And instead of putting his faith in God to get him through this encounter, he put his faith in a magic belt and thereby, eroded his faith in God. So he's broken another one of the 5 central elements of chivalry. He broke courtesy, he broke honor. Now he's broken faith by putting his faith in the wrong place. But the Green Knight says you did it to save your life, and I can't really blame you for that. You know, everybody wants to save their life. Maybe the one excuse, the one reason to break your word is if your life is on the line. And Gawain stood silent, stood a long time, so burdened with grief that his heart shuddered. Now, this is the moment when Gawain becomes a dynamic character. He was pretty static throughout this entire thing, but he suddenly realizes that he's not as good. He's not as perfect as he once thought himself. He's not an ideal knight. And he feels the shame. He feels the sorrow of failure. And knowing it's not just knowing his own failure, because he knew that in the room with the lady when he took the belt, but somebody else knowing his failure. Let's see. So burdened with grief, his heart shuddered. His blood ran like fire in his face. He winced for shame at the green man's words. And finally, he found words of his own. A curse on cowardice and a curse on greed. They shatter chivalry. Their vice destroys virtue. Then he loosened the belt, unfastened it, and grimly threw it to the green man. There, take the faithless thing, may it rot. Fear of your blow taught me cowardice, brought me to greed, took me from myself and the goodness, the faith that belonged to knighthood. I'm false now. Forever afraid of bad faith and treachery, may trouble, may sorrow come to them. No, knight, I humbly confess my faults. Bless me with the chance to atone. I'll try to sin less. Sort of like a confession moment. He's like, you're right. I was scared, and I broke my faith. I broke my code of chivalry. I'm not a very good knight. Give me a chance to atone. Atone means to make up for my failures, and he'll try to sin less. Then the green man laughed and courteously explained, the damage you did me is cured. It's gone. You stand confessed so clean. You took such plain penance at the point of my axe that I hold you cleansed, as pure in heart as if from your birth to this day you'd never sinned. And Gawain, I give you this belt, as green as my gown. Remember your challenge here as you walk your way among knights and princes. Keep this token for chivalrous men to know your adventure at the Green Chapel. And now, in this new year, come to my castle again. We will finish this festival with good cheer. And he pressed him to come, saying, my wife will be there. You can make her your friend who was once your bitter foe. So the Green Knight is like, yeah, you know what? You're cleansed. You've taken penance. I cut you with my axe. That cut on your neck is for your failure to keep your code of chivalry. But really, compared to other men, remember, you're a pearl to a pea. Everybody else would have failed. Everybody else would have. What would have happened if Gawain had slept with this one? When he came here to the chapel, boom, his head would have been cut from his shoulders, right? So, like, he failed, but he failed a little. He didn't fail a lot. And that little failure is kind of really good for a human being who usually makes much worse failures. So the Green Knight gives Gawain back the belt. He threw the belt to the Green Knight, and he's like, no, keep it, as a reminder of this quest of what's gone on for you. No, truly, said Gawain, taking off his helmet and thanking the Green Knight courteously. I've lingered long enough. May happiness come to you, from him who decrees all honors, and convey my wishes to your gracious wife, and to the other honored lady who cleverly tricked their knight. No wonder. There's nothing remarkable in their making a man foolish, and women winning men to sin. For Adam, our father, was deceived just so, and Solomon, and also Samson, Delilah was his death, and later David endured misery for Bathsheba's beauty. Women ruined them. How wonderful if men could love them well, but never believe them. And these were the noblest knights of their time, the very best, who walked the world in those days, and women tied them in knots, whirled them in circles. I've been beguiled, as they were. This excuse should be heard. Pause. Come on, Gawain, really? I mean, this is a medieval work, and this is expressing a medieval view of women. It's women's fault. Like, it was Eve who caused original sin, and look at all these bad women through history, and, Gawain is making excuses. I think this is the ultimate fail of his humility here. He's like, yeah, it's not weird that women cause men to sin. Like, that's historical in the Bible. And, when you go back and you look at history, it's a pretty weak excuse. And he's trying to excuse his negative behavior. To be fair, I've been a high school teacher for 13 years, and I watch young men do really, really stupid things for women all the time. But to blame the women for that is foolish. The person who makes a decision about what they're doing is, you make your own decisions. And so for a person to blame their behavior on a woman is not only incorrect, it's weak. And, you make your decisions. And you make them based on whatever outside stimuli they are, but you're responsible for your own actions at the end of the day. And Gawain seems to be trying to avoid that. Anyway, enough sermoning. Let's get back in here. But your belt, said Gawain, may God reward you. I'll keep it gladly, not for its gold, nor for its lovely silk, nor its polished stones, not its cost, not for honor, nor the glorious craft that made it, but to see it often as a sign of my sin. If I ride in glory, to remember the weakness and error of this feeble flesh, how easily infected with the filth of sin. And if ever pride for my feats of arms stirs me, this belt will humble my heart. So Gawain's like, I'll take the belt. I'm not going to take it to remember the glory of this quest. I'm going to take it to remember how I failed. It's like, getting a failed test in class and taping it to your bedroom mirror so you can see it every day before you go to sleep and when you wake up, and it will remind you to be better. So I think it's interesting. I mean, I guess right after he sort of fails his humility by blaming women, he's like, I'm going to keep this belt and I'm going to wear it as a symbol of my failure, as a symbol of my sin, to remind myself to be better. So I think that's an interesting change. Let's see. One thing, let me ask you, without offense. You rule that land where I lived, where I rested in your castle. May he repay you who keeps the stars in the sky and sits in heaven. Tell me only your name, nothing more. Gladly, said the Green Knight. I am Bersalak, the hot dessert. Wow, that's a weird name. But actually, this has been a temptation story, and we said maybe Gawain represents Jesus in some level. Where was Gawain's temptation taking place? Well, it was taking place at the castle of Bersalak, the hot desert. Hot desert. Right? Where was Jesus tempted? In the desert. There's like an allusion here in the name. I mean, you could argue that his wife is a hot dessert too. But that's certainly not what they're going for here. Anyway, here comes the big reveal. We want to know why the Green Knight is green. We want to know what the overarching, plan was. Here it is. Listen carefully. Morgana Le Fay, who lives in my house, a famous witch with wonderful magic learned from Merlin, the master of that art, for she shared his bed once, that noble wizard and wise man who knows the knights of Arthur's Hall, Morgana the goddess she is called, and no one in all the world could resist her call if she bade him come. Morgana sent me to your king's castle to test your pride, to determine the truth of the Round Table's fame and the tales that tell it. She hoped my lopped-off head would addle your brains, would frighten Arthur's queen and kill her with fear, a green ghost standing at her table, speaking head in hand. And that ancient lady Morgana is also Arthur's half-sister, your aunt, daughter of the Duchess of Cornwall, that duchess by whom Uther Pendragon had Arthur. And I ask you to come to your aunt. Be merry in my house. My men love you and I want you there by my faith for myself as much as I've ever wanted anyone. Okay. Apparently the Green Knight still has a bromance going on with, Gawain. But what I think, we need to say here is that the big reveal is that the old lady, remember the young lady had this old lady with her, sort of like as her chastity belt ring man. That was Morgana Le Fay. Morgan Le Fay, the great villain from all the King Arthur stories who is opposed to King Arthur. And this whole thing was a plan to ruin King Arthur. She wanted Arthur to take this challenge because Arthur would not have been able to resist. I mean, that's why he ended up having a son called Mordred. If you go back and you read the Arthur stories, his resistance to the advances of young, attractive women was not great. Gawain resisted and thereby saved his life. And he saved King Arthur's life by going on this quest because if Arthur had taken it up, he would have failed. And he would have had his head chopped off. The whole plan here was foiled by Gawain being the knight that he is and taking on the challenge instead of Arthur. Let's see how Gawain responds. And Gawain again said no, he could not. They embraced and kissed and commended each other to Christ and parted on that snow-covered field. And Gawain and Gringolet rode home to Arthur's castle, and the Green Knight rode where he pleased alone. Now Gawain rides in the world's wilderness, alive by the gracious mercy of God. He slept under roofs, he slept under trees, and he knew adventures and won victories that I hope to tell some different time. The nick in his neck had grown whole. He wore that gleaming belt slanted across his tunic, tied beneath his arm as a sign and token of the sin he'd committed, and his sorrow and shame. And so he arrived at court, safe and sound, and the king, when he heard, called to his knights, laughing, delighted that Gawain was home. And he kissed his knight, and the queen kissed him, and a host of noble soldiers greeted him, asked his adventures, and he told them marvelous things, never concealing his hardships, and told them of the chapel, described the Green Knight, talked of the lady, and at last of the belt. He showed them the faint scar on his neck, sign of his treachery, given as a loving warning. He groaned, admitting it, suffered torment, blood flooded the skin in his face as he mourned it. My lord, said Gawain, lifting the belt, this band and the nick on my neck are one and the same. The blame and the loss I suffered for the cowardice, the greed that came to my soul. This sign of bad faith is the mark of my sin. I'll wear it on my waist as long as I live. For a man may hide an injury to his soul, but he'll never be rid of it. It's fastened forever. What a great line. A man may hide an injury to his soul, but he'll never be rid of it. Nobody has to see it from the outside, but he's going to wear the belt as a reminder of the failure, as a physical representation of the injury to his soul that he caused himself by being faithless, right? And so I think we see Gawain's character change. He's not proud to, how do I want to say this? Give me one second. He committed his sins, if you will, in secret, right? Like, and he was sort of ashamed of showing them to people, but now he's accepted his failure and he's showing it outwardly and wearing it as a symbol with that belt. The king consoled him, and all that court. I'm going to finish this and we'll call it done, and I'll do an analysis lecture sort of following it up. The king consoled him and all the court, and they laughed and resolved then and there that lords and ladies of Arthur's table would each of them wear a slanted belt around their waists, woven of green to keep company with their well-loved Gawain. And that belt was the glory of Arthur's round table. Its knights wore it forevermore, as the best books of romance tell. And so in Arthur's time this adventure took place, as the book of Brutus bears witness, after that bold Brutus appeared in Britain when the siege and assault had done for Troy. We're going back to that weird illusion bookend that we had at the beginning. Now we have it at the end. It didn't work in the beginning. It's still not working in the end, but he's trying to close it all up, and we'll let it go. And other adventures as well, of great and loyal knights. Now may the royal king of the world keep us from hell. And then there's some Latin that translates into shame on him who finds evil here, which is weird and seems strange at the end of this story. It's probably sort of a joke directed sort of at the king when you go back and look at it. But it's not worth going into. So that's Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. That's how it ends. Part 4. I'm going to call this over because I'm at 45 minutes and I don't want it to go longer for you. We'll do some analysis next time. Thanks.